At that time, I was just like, no, I can't put up with this anymore. I have to leave. Like, I knew I had to leave as well. And I was so broke at that time, but I honestly didn't care. He was so upset by this. Like, he was so mad that I stood up for myself.
Welcome to Pints and Pizza with Professors, a podcast dedicated to help you, the college student, crush it in the classroom and in your careers.
We're just two college professors with an obsession for learning and a great slice of pie, throwing out no BS truth bombs to help guide you through the unknown.
We also celebrate the ideas and talents of emerging professionals and embrace the learning culture of now.
We're all adults having adult conversations, so adult language might be used.
Hey, grab a slice of pie, grab a pint, and let's go shoot the ish.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 5 of Pints and Pizza with Professors. Today, we're talking all about the war stories and the growing pains that can happen whenever you begin your career, either as an intern, in your full-time position. This is going to be a really raw and real episode today because we have got Tati Petkovic as our guest today. She is a graphic designer here in Toronto, Ontario. She is also the owner of Moon Sign Supplies, which is an astrology-inspired accessory and stationery company. And she's also an instructor at OCAD University here in Toronto. So we will hear her story, which is incredible, of some of the challenges, the extreme challenges that she came across as both an intern and in her very first position. But before that, hello, Jason, my amazing co-host. How you doing today?
I'm growing great. Megan, how are you? It's good to talk to
I'm
you again,
good.
obviously.
I know. Yeah, I can't believe we're at episode 5. Can you
I know.
believe it?
The 5 episode mark. There's sort of, we should put like a patch on the episodes, like the 5th show anniversary.
I
Things
know.
like that.
It's like
But
the jackets that they get on Saturday Night Live. The hosts
yes,
when
the
yeah.
5-timers club. There you
Yeah,
go.
there you go. The
Oh,
5 episode club.
if only Steve Martin and Martin Short were there to hand out the jackets, I think we'd be in good shape.
That would be awesome. I think that needs to happen.
Yeah.
So today we're talking about our real and raw experiences when we started out as professionals. So we get out of school, we have all these hopes and dreams and rainbows and unicorns, and my life is going to be amazing. And doesn't really turn out that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jason, you have a whole plethora of experience in media, PR. Tell us some of the challenges or a specific challenge or a really difficult time that you faced as an emerging professional.
Well, I will say from the television side of things, I was always nervous going into a job. I didn't want to get fired. And I think that's what you think about when you want to have confidence, but I think you go into it thinking, man, the first time I screw up, I'm going to get in big trouble. I'll probably get fired. Television and radio are such a constant medium that if something goes wrong on air or something goes wrong behind the scenes and it could be your fault, you're called on the carpet, you could let go. The great thing about it was that I had overly great experiences in my television and radio career. Sure, there were times I thought, oh man, this could really blow up in my face. And you have arguments with coworkers or something, but all in all, I think they were good experiences. When I got into public relations, it was obviously I had never. I think I've said this many times that I've never took a PR course. I've learned along the way from mentors and learning as I go from reading and learning from people that have meant a lot in my career. But I will say there was one instance in my career, especially in public relations, that really challenged me. And I will say, not only did it challenge me to the perspective of from a mental standpoint, as far as the work, it was the surrounding things as well. I had a boss that was very, at first was great. I felt like I could be trustworthy, or I felt like he was trustworthy. Um, and then as it got on a little bit, it became toxic. I could do nothing wrong. I mean, sorry, I could do nothing right. Everything I did was wrong. If my writing style wasn't up to his standards or it wasn't how he would do it, I was wrong. He would make recommendations that maybe I should consider making a change. I should go, into another side of PR. Maybe I should do sports instead of doing, traditional PR. And
Wow. Now I just want to pause just a sec because in our last episode, in episode 4 with Deirdre Breckenridge, we talk a lot about the importance of feedback.
Mhm.
So I'm assuming that this supervisor never gave you any feedback as to what you were doing wrong. He just, no matter what you did, like it was wrong.
Yeah, and I mean, I would get feedback, and I even took some of the recommendations. I, wanted to make sure my writing was better. So of course, I'm going to listen to people that are good writers and think. So I did
Mhm.
all the things that he would recommend early on, and then it just got to the point where it didn't matter what I did, I was always wrong. Every story that I did had to be rewritten, or everything. If we were doing citations for something, for an honoree, I wrote one that I thought was really, really good. It actually captured the essence of who this person was. Nope, didn't matter. It was wrong. This is not how they would have written it. And I would get.
Mm.
I found out from people in HR that he tried to get me fired, and it was. I will say it was probably, aside from getting let go from a job, this was the most challenging and mentally exhausting time in my career. Um, I and I can tell you, just because, and this it shaped, though it did shape how I looked at things moving on in the classroom, but also how I was as a consultant. I promised that I would not treat others how I was treated by this person,
Mhm.
and especially students, and especially
Yeah.
young professionals,
Yeah.
because we're all learning. And when you hear Tati's story, I think you'll understand the way what we're talking about here. In that, it's important that any professional, young, mid-level, even experienced professional, that you believe in your skills. It's not to the point where you're acting sort of pigheaded, but you're saying, look, if I have room to grow, I always want to be a student of the game. I don't want to be that person that feels like I know everything, I don't have anything to improve on. We do this every day. But when it comes down to the verbal abuse and the way of talking to people and making them feel like they are the smallest piece of dirt, and we feel like we are not valued, that is going to not only, destroy us inside in many ways, but it's also going to hurt us in a mental state as far as what we're doing there. So I think in that case, for me, as it hurt a lot, and I have no problem saying how much it hurt me mentally and put doubt in my mind as to whether I could really do this in my career. I'm thankful that I left when I had the opportunity to do it. I still was sort of getting over that experience when I got to my next job. So it really took me a while, basically until I became a consultant, that I was able to finally kind of break out of the frustration of what had happened and feeling like I wasn't worthy and wasn't good enough, to becoming to the point where, hey, I know I can do this. I know that I know my skills. I know my worth. But sometimes it doesn't happen that easily. And it's not something that can be prevented and changed overnight. So, I mean, my advice would be to anybody listening to this would be, take time out for yourself and focus on what's important. Focus on your mental and physical health. If something at your job, whether it's a boss or the work itself, is draining you physically, it's making you feel like the work that you're doing isn't as important as it should be, do something about it now. Don't wait. Don't wait and say, oh, it's going to improve. It could get better, because you may think it will, but for all intents purposes, if it's bad now, unless that person leaves or the culture changes, it's going to stay the same.
Absolutely. And my story is a little bit different than yours as to being a young professional and not knowing any better, which I'll get to that in a second, but you're absolutely right. And I follow Gary Vee, and I love Gary Vee. He's nuts, but I love him. But I saw a video that he did the other day, and it was like, if you're not happy in a job, and if it is taking that extreme toll on you, on your mental health, on your physical health, then get the hell out. And you can always find another crappy job somewhere else.
Yeah.
And just because happiness is the currency we're in right now. It's not about the benefits. It's not about money. It's not about like, it doesn't, none of that matters if you don't have your sanity. And if you're, for me, like I was in a similar toxic position, and I remember I was exhausted. I would come home every night. I would change into my pajamas. It's like 6 o'clock in the evening, and I would lay on the couch and watch TV all night. I would zone out. I'd be asleep because it was just so draining, and it was not a healthy environment to be around. But I'm just going to pivot to actually a story that I've never told before to anybody.
Mhm.
Actually, that's a lie. I told you that before we started recording, but the story that I have as far as making missteps as a new professional, I'd gotten out of college, and my first job right out of school, I was a waitress at Chili's, and I'm proud to say it. So it was a great learning experience, and I met a lot of cool people. And then I got a job as a customer service rep at a local bank in Indianapolis. And again, good experience for the most part. Didn't pay a whole lot, but I had a cool manager, nice people to work with. I thought I literally invited all of them to my wedding whenever whenever I got married.
Nice.
So yeah, but again, when you're starting out, you want to get into a field that you went to school for. So for me, the natural progression was to get into some kind of marketing role. So I applied for and interviewed for this job. And the guy who I interviewed with, he was the owner. And so he was interviewing me and looking at my resume and saying, like, oh, okay, you went to school, you got this experience, da da da. And he was like, yeah, I think you'd be a really good fit. And it doesn't hurt that you're pretty good looking too.
Oh boy.
And when someone says something like that,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're 23, 24 years old, I was 24. I think I just turned 24. You don't even know what to say to that, because it's just so it just, somebody says something and it's so shocking that you don't know how to, you just kind of freeze, you kind of pause and don't know how to respond. And looking back, I would have just smacked 24-year-old Megan across the face and be like, get out. I would have yelled at that guy, told him to shove it, and walked out of the office. If somebody would have said something to me like that to me now, even though it's a compliment, it's not appropriate. It's not ethical.
Right.
So that I wish I just would have got up and left, but I didn't.
Well, that's because now you know your self-worth, and
Now
I
you
think
know better.
you're
Yeah.
right, and
Yeah.
look, we need to be perfectly honest here. I think there are plenty of things that we've done over our careers when we were younger that we would probably have said, "Well, I would have done something differently," or
Mhm.
in your situation, sure, if this is Megan in 2019, the Megan that you looked back, 10, 15 years ago is going to be a totally different person, and you may have confidence, but you're not going to have the confident experience that you have from right now. And I would have done the same thing in your position of like, oh, that's really nice, and then
Yeah, you
you know
kinda laugh it off and you don't know
right,
what to say, but
because you
it's
don't think
like,
they're serious
isn't
in a
that
way.
kinda like sexual harassment? You know what I
Well,
mean?
yeah,
It's
now
like,
it is,
yeah, now it is, and for me, especially as women, like, we like words of affirmation.
yeah,
We want people to like us, and especially when you're starting out professionally. You want people to like you. Like you said, you're always worried about a misstep or getting fired or whatever. But it turns out, like, not just for that reason, but there are other reasons that I just should have ran the other way, because this person, he failed to pay me on time. And so I had bills that were overdue. When I finally did put in my resignation, I was legitimately moving. I was relocating, and so I put in my resignation, not because I found another job in the area, but so I put in my 2 weeks, and actually, it wasn't even him that did it. It was another one of his employees that came into my office and said, by the way, Friday is going to be your last day. And it was
Oh,
like Wednesday. I was like, oh, nice. That's
yeah.
cool. So anyway, there were a lot of red flags that I wish I would have really paid attention to. But again, you're young and you don't know any better. And
Right.
those kind of things have never happened to me. So this is why we're talking about this. So if you're if you're new in your career or you just got out of school, please take these nuggets of information
Right.
and learn from our big mistakes.
And we should caution too that there are going to be tough times at a job, and it doesn't mean that every time something goes wrong that you need to jump ship.
100%.
It
Yeah,
does mean
absolutely.
that you need to keep it's like I'll use the line from Nick Fury, who from the Marvel universe, where he's got an eye patch over one eye, and he said you need to keep both eyes open, which it sounds like a joke, but in a sense, it is true. You need to keep your eyes open. You need to make sure that the things that are going on around you don't start to feel like there's definitely you get that feeling of okay, something's not right here. If you feel you're in a position where you're not comfortable, or a boss or a supervisor you feel like they're treating you with no respect or little respect, or even if you feel like you're uncomfortable from the perspective of you feel like you're being taken advantage of. Yeah, it's easy for us, and I say this to my students when we talk about ethics and how you would react to something if you were put in a situation. Um, it's very easy for us to sit here and say, go ahead, you need to go to HR, you need to talk to somebody. But our first reaction is not to rock the boat.
Mhm.
And sure, there are people that will rock the boat, but sometimes those people that rock the boat are not always truthful. They're doing it because they want to. They're used to creating static and making sure people are aware. But if you're a good employee and you're someone that works hard, you have it and even if you don't work hard and you're getting harassed or verbally abused, you have a right. You need to go and talk to someone, whether it's HR. Find someone that will listen to you, get it on the record, and if you are even that much more uncomfortable because someone finds out, then that is not the place for you. And yes, it's going to hurt to leave, and you may be out without a paycheck for a few months or whatever. Find a way to make it work so you are not staying there for the paycheck and you end up regretting it because it does so much more damage than a paycheck is worth.
Yes. Hell yeah. That's that's my reaction.
Yeah,
Hell yeah.
it's just tough.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, we are in jobs for money, right? We all need to make a living. We all need to pay rent. We have car insurance. We have student loans. We have bills out the wazoo. But no amount of money is worth your sanity and worth a decline in your self-worth. It's just not. It just is not. And and like you said, Jason, it may be scary and it may be uncomfortable, but going to HR, yes, absolutely. If anybody is trying to just be really is creating a toxic environment, you've got to do it. In my situation, I was working for the actual owner, so he was the extra
Yeah.
HR person. But that's when you really have to think about, okay, is this worth it? And 9 times out of 10, it's not.
And no, it's not. And that's what you mentioned. You had brought up a very good point there as far as, especially if it's a small business and the owner is both the owner, HR, hires, blah, blah, blah. I've been in a situation where the owner and the other person were the CEO, CFO, and, basically they would liaise with the, people who did our benefits, but we didn't have an HR department. So who am I going to complain to if something's going wrong? When am I going to go to the person that's been there with, if it's a mom and pop type of thing? You can't. And
Mhm.
that's a tough situation. And I would say in that type of thing, you need to make sure when you're talking to them in an interview that it is made abundantly clear that if there are any issues that need to be addressed, who do you go to? Like if it's something where there's
Mhm.
a problem going on and there's something, how is this resolved? And it's obviously would probably be, well, you get out of there. But, it should, if someone is not running their business ethically and is not treating people well, then why should that business be continued why should they continue to get your business and be employed by them? Or why should other people continue to be thinking that everything's okay when these people are not treating you well? So, I mean,
Mhm.
look, I think we could both stand in our soapbox for a while here about this issue because of our experiences. But I think what I think is great, I think Tati really comes across, and while it's a very tough story to hear from her perspective, I think it does lend credibility to not only what we're saying, but what others say outside of this podcast, what you read, what you hear. And I think that this is why she made such a great guest. And I'm so glad, you got a chance to talk to her.
Yeah, and her story comes from working within a small business. So she shares her experiences working for a small mom and pop shop. I believe she worked for a husband wife team. So I mean, her experiences are just really they're very it's very inspirational because she rose above it and now she's really crushing it here in Toronto. But also it's heartbreaking because it really paints a sad picture of how people are just treated in general. So now Tati Petkovic, she helps writers, creatives, and cultural organizations here in Toronto elevate their stories from conception to impact through her graphic design talents. And as I said before, she is an instructor at OCAD University, which stands for Ontario College of Art and Design here in Toronto. And she is also the founder of Moon Sign Supplies. And without further ado, we are pleased to share Tati's story, and we hope you enjoy. Hi, everyone. Megan Wagner here on Pints and Pizza with Professors. I've got a very special guest with us today. We have Tati Petkovic with us. And Tati is a sessional instructor at OCAD University right here in Toronto, Ontario. She's the founder of Moon Sign Supplies, an astrology-inspired accessory brand. And she has been a freelance graphic designer for the last 6 years. Hi, Tati. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Good. Thank you so much for joining us on Pints and Pizza with Professors. We're so happy to have you here, and we are so excited to hear your story. And when I say we're excited to hear your story, I mean we're excited to learn about you and also hear your story about some of the challenges that you have overcome in your career. And so, I would love to hear your background, what you're currently doing. If I didn't dive into it too much in the bio, and then also. You shared an interesting failure story with me when we first connected, and I'd love it if you would share that with our audience. So, Tati, I will give the microphone over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. So I am a freelance graphic designer for the last, I would say, 6 years. I just recently started teaching at OCAD University, and I recently launched an astrology-inspired accessory brand, which sells tote bags, phone cases, and notebooks that are that are inspired by the zodiac signs energies. And yeah, so basically, I've been designing for a lot of my life. I did my undergrad at OCAD University and graduated in 2014. I then recently graduated from my master's program last year at Ryerson for digital media. And I would say I do have quite a lot of failure stories. Um, in particular, I feel that a lot of my stories connect to me not being able to work anywhere full time. And I have quite a few different stories, but yeah, I'm not sure where would you like me to start?
Oh, wow. I know, right? Sometimes we think back to our careers and we're like, I don't even know where to begin. So walk us through after you graduated.
Okay.
and kind of where your professional career started taking off. In our conversations, you had also talked about an internship that you had
Yes.
that turned out to be actually a really challenging experience for you. So we would love to hear about that as well.
Okay. Awesome. So, I would say I had quite a few internships during my undergrad degree at OCAD, and one of the internships I had, which was right when I was about to graduate. I loved the work that the design studio was doing, so I really didn't need another internship at that point. I feel that I had already like three internships done already, and then I took that internship only because um, I really loved the work that they were doing, and they were like, you really have to start at the bottom if you want to work here. So I was like, okay, sure. So at that point, I would say the internship laws in Ontario weren't established yet. So um, that internship was, I believe, $5 an hour. And
Wow.
yeah, that was that was really fun in that sense. I also had a lot of experience already with other internships. So I said yes to the role. I negotiated my internship from 3 months to 2 months because of my experience. But to be fair, I should have just like tried to negotiate a full-time position. But anyways, I took that chance. I so after about a week in that internship, they fired a junior designer at that studio, and then I took over all of their work. And
Wow.
when yes, so when that happened, I was just like, oh, okay. So at that time, I like it didn't register to me that this is really illegal when I think about it because
Hmm.
it was so. I was basically doing a junior designer's role, and I took over all their clients. Um, I was also in my email signature. I was technically a designer there, so I wasn't like it did not say I was an intern. It said I was a designer.
So basically, they were taking advantage of you by paying you an internship wage
Yes,
and kind of giving the illusion to their clients that you were a junior designer.
yes,
Wow, that's interesting because there is a lot of controversy in the states
hmm
over unpaid internships. And for me personally, I don't agree with that because I feel like even if you're in an intern level, you do need to be compensated. So yeah, it sounds like Ontario in Canada is having those same kind of challenges with the
yeah,
legality of low paying or no paid internships.
yes. Oh my goodness. And I think the laws got better a bit, like maybe 2 or 3 years after that happened to me, but
Hmm.
for sure at that point, I just didn't know what to do. I was very like I honestly just needed money. I like even if it was $5 an hour, I was just like, okay, I love the work I'm doing. I can be really creative at this design studio, um, and I had a lot of responsibilities, and that's was confusing to me because I'm like, okay, at least I can build my portfolio, but at the same time, I was doing so much work. I actually was staying till 10 p.m. Every day to paint interior graphics for restaurants, um,
Wow.
which was insane to me when I think about it now that I was overworking a lot and for very little pay. And yeah, it was just really a bad situation. And I felt so used and manipulated after the first month, and it was just such a depressing, like, it was like such creative work, which I
Hmm.
loved and is rare to get, but it was so, but even after a month, you can tell everyone who was working there that wasn't the manager, or the creative director, sorry, but they hated being there. And the energy was so low for such interesting creative work that I was just like I really don't know how long I can stay here for.
Yeah, and when you think about going to work for a design agency, like you said, that should be fun work. That
Yeah.
should be, so creative and and the fact that because you were being taken advantage of, it
Mhm.
just sucked all the joy out of your work.
For sure.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yes.
So going forward, into your internship, what kind of transpired? How did you what happened kind of when you got to that point where you're like, I am so unhappy, I can't stand it. Like what happened
Yes.
at
Okay.
that point?
Okay. So this is yes. So basically, I was ending my internship um maybe within the week, and I was deciding like what to do, and I honestly like just definitely needed more pay, so I was going to negotiate for more pay, but I did recommend another designer for an internship basically after only working there for a few weeks before I kind of knew like maybe 2 weeks in. So before I kind of knew how negative the space was. So they were actually brought on maybe a month after I started working, but they were not staying like late to work like extra hours. They were just there as an intern, and they were still doing a lot of work though. So basically, I had a conversation with my creative director, and I was like, "Oh, so my internship's ending soon. I just wanted to see if if like to talk about what the next steps are and everything." And then he kind of forgot about that my internship was ending sooner than he initially thought. So he thought it was ending in 3 months, and like the time period was 3 months, and I was like, oh no, we negotiated to 2 months. And then he was like, oh, I don't remember this. And that's when I learned you should always have something in writing. Like, okay,
Yes, 100%.
that was the time when I was just like, shoot, I really wish I emailed him
Mhm.
afterwards and just saying, hey, just confirming 2 months. I really wish I did that at that time. So that was one lesson I really learned.
Mhm.
Um, then he kind of went on to say that he was deciding between me and the person I recommended for the other internship, which one of us he's going to keep. And that kind of broke me to a degree, because I was working um, a lot of extra hours that the other intern wasn't putting in, even though she was an amazing designer, and I was the one who recommended her to join. So
Oh.
then it was just like this weird power game that he was playing, and I was just like, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. Like, this is so weird. Why would you tell me this? And like I was just like, he could have just decided to like let me go, or he could have just decided to um like keep me and just not like tell me that part. But he wanted to tell me in this weird way, to like, I could tell he was trying to play this power struggle game, and just had no part of it. So I was just like, you know what, yeah. So then he told me that, and then I waited. He said he'll let me know by the end of the day or something, and then I said okay. So it was really weird. I went to go talk to him again, and he offered me a junior position, but it was such little pay that I was just like, you know what, I don't think I can take this, like take that amount. And then I asked for more money, and he said he couldn't do that. At that time, I think it was like, like 16, like I think he wanted me to take 16 an hour, and I wanted 18. And I'm like, to be honest, like that's still very low.
Mhm.
Um, Especially like it was still a very low amount. So I was just like, you know what, I don't want to fight for $2 right now. It was like there's no point. So I
Now I
said,
have a question. Do
yeah,
you feel that because they lowballed you initially as an intern and took advantage of you initially,
yeah,
that they felt that they were able to do that again
yeah,
whenever they offered you yeah, okay.
yes,
Okay.
100%. I felt like he thought, since I agreed to such a low amount for my internship, um that he could just take advantage of me. And at that time, I was just like, no, I can't put up with this anymore. I have to leave. Like, I knew I had to leave as well. And
Mhm.
I was so broke at that time, but I honestly didn't care. But I was also at this situation where he had no one else to help him with the painting of interior graphics at that time because one of the other designers was leaving for vacation for a month. So I was the only one painting the rest of the interior graphics. So at that time, I was like, I'm still happy to help you finish the interior graphics, but I would be charging a freelance rate at this stage. And that was the only time that was the first time I stood up for myself, where I was just like, I'm happy to help you out with finishing the rest of the interior graphics for my rate. But in terms of taking on and keeping this internship position, I'm so sorry. I don't think I can stay. Or sorry, this junior designer position. But I don't think I can stay. And yeah, and I tried to end in good terms, but he was so upset by this. Like he was so mad that I stood up for myself in a sense.
Wow.
Like I could see how it was, yeah, it was not a great feeling. And I remember just coming in to pick up my check and he was um I think he was yelling at me at that time. Like I can't remember exactly, but he actually was so rude to me when I came to pick up my last check. And yeah, I just left. And then I had to like look for another position, a full-time position, which was actually ended up being worse than that situation.
Oh no. So you're at you've transitioned from your internship to a junior designer position. Then you leave on I and you leave on and you were hoping it was on good terms, but this person was yelling at you when you
Yeah.
picked up your paycheck, and then you left for another position, and that turned out to be worse. How did that transpire and come about?
Okay, so yes, so the second position was my first full-time design position, and to be honest, like this was also very low pay. This was actually very close to minimum wage at that time. It was, I think it was 14 an hour. And the only reason I took it was because, of course, I needed money. And the design work at the studio was really good. But I had like a lot of red flags during the interview and everything, but I kind of ignored them and I was just like, you know what, I really need this money. I'm gonna take a chance, and I'm gonna take this other position. And I go into it, and it was like a husband-wife couple design studio, and I was essentially their first designer, which is always like a risky situation that I know now.
Mhm.
But essentially, I would go into work. They would not say hi to me at work, by the way. Like if I entered and I say hi, like they would not say hi to me, which was rude.
What?
Uh,
Oh, who does that, right?
no, I was just like, I'm like there's three people in here. Like like if you don't say hi to someone, it's really weird. Like it's like
Yeah.
there's three people in this studio. Like I don't understand.
Wow.
It was so weird. So, and then I would work on, I was designing and I was working on some projects, and I remember sketching my concepts, and so the wife would actually yell at me for sketching my ideas and concepts. And I was just like, what? Like she would just be over my shoulder and she's like, why are you sketching right now? What are you doing? And I'm like, I'm just trying to be creative and come up with my concepts, which they taught you at OCAD. And like I think she went to Sheridan, but I'm like, I'm sure they did that at Sheridan too. So
Yeah, and just for people who maybe aren't familiar with graphic design and how, creative art direction, sketching a concept, that's like a best practice. That's like very basic best practice, correct?
yes, yes, for
Yes.
sure. It's very basic. It's very it's just getting your ideas down and making
Right.
sure you like easily can come up with different concepts. And I feel like everyone has a different creative process as well. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, so it was very strange to me. Like she was over my shoulder. She was watching my screen behind me, and like it was so strange. She would just come up to me and like kind of just hound me for like random things I was doing and designing, and like, why aren't you doing this faster? Like, why aren't you um and so she was the creative director with her husband at that time, and there were so many instances where they would yell about me in front of me, in a very
Wow.
aggressive way. Like, it wasn't like straight up yelling, but it was like bickering. um,
Mhm.
and it would made me so uncomfortable. Like, it was like the worst feeling because I'm like, I'm right here, like.
Right.
And she and
They
her
you
husband,
can hear them. You can hear them, like, talk about you. Oh my goodness.
yeah, like,
Ugh.
it was crazy. So they would yeah, it just made me feel so uncomfortable, and I was just like, what just happened? Like,
Right.
and it was just like, what, like, they would be like, why did you make her do this thing? And like, why did you, like, there was no privacy as well in that loft type design studio, but it was just so weird to me that I started to get anxiety attacks, like after work, like on weekends. I was getting really stressed out because, um, honestly, like, I think only the husband of the design studio liked my work, and the wife did not seem to like my work. So I just was really confused as to why they hired me.
Mhm.
So I was like, okay. And I felt like he was always sticking up for my work and she wasn't.
Mhm.
So after, like, I only lasted about a month here, to be
Mhm.
fair, which, like, honestly, was giving me such anxiety. Like, I had so much anxiety from it and so much stress that I just hated going into work. And there was a point where I was just like, you know what? I rather work like at like a fast food restaurant than work here. Like, I rather do
Mhm.
anything other than like come into work than like work here. So, um, at that point, I was just like, okay, I'm gonna give my 2 weeks notice and leave. And I go into work, and the husband was there, but the wife wasn't there. And I just was like, I'm so, like, I just want to thank you, but I really need to talk to you about something. I just wanted to give you my 2 weeks notice. I'm so grateful for this opportunity and everything. And then, but I really don't think I can stay here. And I just wanted to give my 2 weeks notice. And I was very polite. I was very, grateful and considerate. And then he was so mad that he was like, just give me your key and leave.
Oh, so you were fired on the spot then.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Even though again, you are taking the high road, even though these people are making you absolutely miserable and having a really bad effect on your mental health.
Yes.
And you offered your 2-week notice and they just up and fired you.
Yes.
Oh, geez.
And to be honest, I was actually relieved that I didn't have to go into work, the next day. I was just like, what just happened? But I just, like, I left, and honestly, I do feel like things happen for a reason. Which is, so I left and went straight to my old university, which was OCAD. And I go to talk to my, like, I actually, like, this was at 9:30 a.m. In the summer, and I go straight to OCAD, and I'm like, I try to find anyone who's currently there, like a professor. And I run into my chair, the chair of the program there, and I'm like, this is just what happened to me. Like, I'm so confused and lost. And at that time, he was like, he offered like some suggestions of like, oh, are you interested in a different position? And at that time I was like, I cannot go into another design studio. Like,
Mhm.
I was so scared of going into a different design studio at that point that I was just like, no, I don't think I could do it. But he offered me a teaching assistant position on the spot, but for,
Oh, that's great.
which was amazing because he
Yeah.
knew how, like, he knew how I worked. He knew my experience and like how much, like, my dedication. So that didn't start for another few months, but to get that, like, the day I quit um this terrible, like, a terrible design studio, I was actually so relieved and so happy, and I felt like it was supposed to happen in a sense.
Mhm.
um
Right.
so yeah, so afterwards, I still had a few months before that teaching assistant position started, and that wasn't a full-time position. So I knew I didn't want to. I knew I didn't want to go back to a full-time position because I honestly felt like I had PTSD at that time, and I was so scared of like being stuck in a different situation that I couldn't escape.
Right. And a lot of people who have been fired, including myself. I lost my job back in 2015.
Hmm.
My co-host Jason too lost his job. And of course, it's the obvious when you lose your job, there's a cutoff in income, which can give you anxiety enough. But we don't talk enough about the mental aspect that being let go or being rejected has on a person.
Yeah.
So can you speak a little bit to that and how you overcame that, maybe that lack of confidence or that fear of going back into working for someone else? Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yes, for sure. So, I mean, I think it was still something I struggled with for at least a year. But for me, I knew I just didn't want to apply to a place that I didn't know anyone who was currently working there. And
Hmm.
luckily, I had a few previous internships and I knew designs, like I had design studios that I worked for in the past that were quite like were that had amazing people. And one of them, like someone I knew from a previous design studio, they called me about a week after I quit my design position. And to me, it was quite strange because they knew I took on that full-time position, but they called me to ask me to freelance for the design studio. And um, I honestly feel like she kind of knew she actually knew those people in that design studio, so she might have like anticipated the outcome in a sense, but she didn't
Hmm.
admit that to me. But I she actually like worked with them before and she understood the situation very
Hmm.
well. So she called me and she was like, "Hey, do you want to freelance? We might just need some extra help for a few days." And for me, I was like, "That's a perfect situation because I loved working with her. I felt more comfortable around her. Like she was an amazing creative director." And I was like, "Yes, for sure." So I would go freelance maybe 2 or 3 days a week at another small design studio. And during that time, though, it was a bit strange for me to adjust to a better like working situation because I remember like I would be working on something and I would do it really quickly and I would give so many concepts. And she actually came to me and she was like, you know, I love that you're working super hard and I love that you're showing all these like concepts and things, but you should relax more. And um
Oh, so it's like you were overcompensating for
yes.
that lack of confidence and maybe those other negative emotions that were kind of swirling through your head.
Yes,
Wow,
for sure.
interesting.
And
Yeah.
it was surprising for me to hear that in a sense because I think she could tell that I was stressed and she could tell that I was afraid of like whatever happened in my past situations.
Yeah.
I honestly remember like physically jumping like slightly every time someone was behind me because I I
Wow.
could not like get comfortable when someone was behind me because I always remembered those experiences at those other design studios where I mean the husband wife couple who actually were hovering behind me and yelling at me for like sketching or whatever I was doing and trying to micromanage me in a sense. So I was actually physically jumping in my seat and it took me a while to notice this, but I'm not sure if like other people at the studio noticed this, but um, it took me like quite a few months to kind of just get used to like understanding that it's not the same place, it's not the
Mhm.
same experience at all. It was actually a very great experience to freelance for that design studio, and um, I was actually so grateful to have that. Um, but yeah, I think it was. I learned then that I'm like, maybe I should just freelance at that time, because I honestly did not feel comfortable in taking any full-time positions. And then I started to just get used to freelancing. So I kind of fell into freelancing. I just started to freelance at design studios, which gave me the flexibility of like coming and going whenever I wanted. Um, to a certain degree, like maybe certain days or like a few months, but it wasn't like, oh, this there's not a hard contract that I can't get out of, or there's not like um yeah, so I felt that I fell into freelancing and at first I felt like a failure in terms of like I could not keep a 9 to 5 job.
Mhm.
Um, but I know now that like it's just not the type of person I am. I just felt I started to just love freelancing. Like I loved the flexibility of it and the freedom of it. And yeah, I've been doing that ever since that time, which was like 6 years ago.
Yeah, and you bring up a very good point about personalities, and I think that a lot of students, especially if they're coming out of college, they're going into the workforce. There's this box that everyone's kind of expected to fit into. Like, you know what I mean? Like if oh go get a job with a good company and work 9 to 5 and come home, and that is not the way of the workforce anymore. You've
No.
got to, especially with younger workers, because they want the freedom and flexibility. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is the way it should be. We need to uh live and rather we need to live to work rather than work to live, right? And I feel, I get really irritated when I hear of companies that just want seat warmers. So
Yes.
I used to work for a company, and they were such sticklers about you have to be here at 8:30 in the morning on the nose and at your desk and start working. It's like, come on. Like,
Yeah.
and so I get really irritated when I hear that, because we have the technology that allows us to be accessible when we need to be, and we don't need to be seat warmers. If it's bad weather outside, which, as you know, we typically get in the Northeast, why am I
Sure.
going to kill myself coming into work where I can log in from home and be safe and not be slipping and sliding all over the roads to get into the office, and frankly get more done and be more productive? Why is that a bad thing? So, and a lot of people have those personalities where they need to have that flexibility, and maybe not start the workday until 11 a.m., or you start the workday at 6 a.m. and then you're done by noon or 1. And I get really irritated. As you can notice, I'm irritated with 9 to 5. Because honestly, that's just not the way the world works anymore. And I hope more companies can hear stories like yours and really get with it, and just be able to make sure, number one, company culture is at the forefront. And companies that ignore it, and companies that say they get it but they don't, shame on them. And any manager who is going to belittle an employee like that has absolutely no business being in management or overseeing employees whatsoever. They have no business. They should not have jobs, in my opinion. So, 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 so your story, you start out with a really bad internship. It goes into a bad full-time job. Then that full-time job goes into an even worse full-time job. And then you got to your breaking point, and you just had to, for your own sanity, get out of that situation, even though you knew you're not going to have the income coming in.
Mhm.
Is there anything, looking back, what was the single biggest lesson you learned from all of that, I guess, badness in your career, knowing what you know now?
Um, yeah, I think the biggest lesson is to know your worth. And it was something I struggled with so much, especially at the beginning of my career. And it's still something to be honest, I still struggle with it as well. Like I've raised my rate a lot, but it's like money is an issue that a lot of designers don't talk about. And um, I feel like knowing my worth has helped me learn so like just stick up with for myself more and um, I feel like I wouldn't have done anything differently. I'm really happy I left those bad experiences at the time that I did.
Hmm.
Um, and I've learned that during those experiences, I knew that I needed to put my mental health at the forefront of what my values are in life. And that's why I stayed as a freelancer. Like I needed it for my mental health, like to have, like I of course did not make much money. And I still like I'm still freelancing, so it's still difficult, but it's like understanding that I value my mental health above everything else in terms of money and in terms of like I also value like the way I live my life, which is the flexibility and adaptability of being a freelancer. And I think that yeah, the biggest lesson was definitely knowing my worth and sticking up for myself and understanding and being okay with not following the guideline of other companies and like understanding that it's okay that I don't have a full-time job. Like I think that took a while too. Like I always felt like a failure because I didn't have that um that full-time job with a salary with like benefits, which was so hard for me because I'm like, yeah, I wish I had that, but it at the same time I did not wish that I did not want a full-time job. So I would always like apply for jobs. I remember like I was applying for a lot of full-time jobs and then I'm like and then they would give me the job and I would be like, no, I think I'm okay. And
Hmm.
I was like,
Yeah.
I feel bad, but it was helping me practice my interview skills. But I was interviewing for full time jobs like continuously for 5 6 years, and to be fair, like I just kind of did it to like help my interview skills. But I was like, maybe a full time job will come along where I actually want to take it, and then it hasn't. Like
Hmm.
it actually hasn't. So it's just understanding myself more is like I just cannot work um, at a full time job for someone else. Like I rather just freelance for other people or like for myself or for other design studios. I rather just have that flexibility.
Yeah. So if there are, college students and new college graduates that may be listening to this, what one piece of advice would you give someone going into the workforce or getting ready to start an internship or getting ready to go out on their own?
Um, okay, so I think my biggest, I guess, tip of advice would be to um, I think understanding your worth was is a good tip for sure. So I think that's one. Another one is to remain adaptable and flexible in a lot of situations. And I think because I've been very adaptable and flexible in like a lot of work situations, even if they do like get a full-time position, like having that flexibility with projects and a lot of things will help them so much in terms of life. But it's also like understanding that like life does not turn out the exact way you planned. So just being okay with the uncertainty of things and being okay with um, changes happening in your life. And it is hard. Like it's definitely difficult. So if like they're like anyone's feeling discouraged, like it's okay, like things will get better and like understanding that um life is not what you always planned it to be. It's more of like what you need to learn at that time and better things will come to you eventually. And I really believe that. Like, I believe, like, if you are a genuine person and you are working hard um and you know what you want in life, and you will manifest it, and you will, like, it will come to you. It might take some time, and you might have to learn a few things along the way, but um just understand that it will eventually come. You just have to keep believing it will come.
Yes, and I like to use the phrase, the universe has a way of taking care of you.
Yes.
And yes, that is so right on, Tati. That was excellent advice for our listeners. And I cannot thank you enough for being on with us. I really, Jason and I both really appreciate your time. Now, where can our listeners find you on the interwebs?
So I don't post on my personal that much, but I have my astrology inspired accessory brand, which is Moon Sign Supplies, and I have an Instagram account for that. But my personal handle on Instagram is at Tati Petkovic. Um, and yeah, hopefully, like, I'm most active on Instagram, but you can also find me on both of those websites. So www.moonsignsupplies.com or www.tatipetkovic.com.
Fantastic. Well, Tati, thank you so much for being here. And I hope and I'm certain that your story will inspire others. And whether they're getting ready to go out into the career world, or whether they're going through a really difficult time right now, we can always find inspiration in other people's stories. So I really appreciate you sharing with us today.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it, everyone. Tati's story was incredibly inspiring. And, Jason and I just said that this episode specifically, could have been probably 4 hours because we have so much stuff that we could have shared. But the bottom line is, if you're starting out in your career, please, please, please take care of your physical health, take care of your mental health, and avoid toxic situations at all costs, because we can tell you personally, it is absolutely not worth it. Right, Jason?
Absolutely. And I think if anybody comes away with anything, it's the mental side of your life. The job is wonderful. Getting a job, getting that first job, getting that feeling like you're wanted is wonderful. But if you're not looking at the side of things where if people continually beat you down, or you feel like there is something going on at where you're working, you need to make sure you're looking at how it's affecting you. There is nothing more important than your physical and mental well-being. And if something is eroding that, if it is your job, if it's people at your job, your boss, etc., look at what you're doing, look in the mirror, and decide, I need to make a change, or I need to speak up, or both. And when you do that, you will empower yourself and you'll feel stronger. It may hurt for a while, but it'll be better in the long run.
Yes. So again, thank you for tuning in, everyone. Thank you to Tati for her very real and unfiltered accounts of the challenges that she faced in her career and how she was able to rise above them. So thanks again for listening, and we will see you all next week on Pints and Pizza with Professors.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Pints and Pizza with Professors. If you like what you've heard today on the podcast, we'd be so grateful if you'd leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening on.
Also, connect with us on social: Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook. You know where to go. At Pints Pizza Props. You have a question? We'll answer it on the podcast. Use the hashtag Pints Pizza Props.
Once again, I'm Megan Wagner.
And I'm Jason Malika. Cheers.